Welcome, everyone. We're going to get this Rotary Club of Des Moines meeting started for September 10th. I'm President Doug Saltzgaver and happy to be back for how many now weeks in a row? 7 I'm getting from the back. 7 weeks in a row here at Wakanda Club. For those of you here in person live, and for those of you watching live on our streaming network on YouTube, and those of you watching later on YouTube. Welcome to all of you, and again, thanks to Invictus Media for filming our meeting today and doing a great job as they have for the last 7 weeks. I'm not wearing my mask while at the podium, which I'd be proud to do, being the cyclone emblem. I'm not wearing it because I'm appropriately distanced from you, and I will be sanitizing the microphone between speakers, of course. And what a change in the weather from last week. A nip in the air reminds me of college football right around the corner. Thankfully, my Iowa State Cyclones will be going into this Saturday 1-0 because of the forfeit by the Hawkeyes. We do ask you keep your masks on while not eating or drinking or speaking from the podium. I'll accept this character out here who's got a Hawkeye mask on. Very faint "Go Hawks" there for those of you who didn't hear it on live stream. I will now ask Susan Schoenberg to share a moment of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. First.
Well, thank you, President Doug. Today we're very fortunate to have John Sorensen from the Iowa Bankers Association. And I'm very lucky to have John serving the Iowa PBS Foundation. Very grateful for his expertise. So today we are talking about banking, with apologies in advance for John, who's probably of this before. Let's see what some interesting people have to say about banking. John Paul Getty said, if you owe the bank $100, that's your problem. If you owe the bank $100 million, that's their problem. Very true, right? Willie Sutton, the infamous bank robber, said, success in any endeavor requires single-minded attention to detail and total concentration. He also said, it's a rather pleasant experience to be alone in a bank at night. And I found this on some motivational posters. Work until your bank account looks like a phone number. I think I'd like mine with area code. That'd be good. And another motivational poster, they said, I never see you at the club. And I said, I never see you at the bank. Very true, right? But here's one that I don't agree with. Money looks better in the bank than on your feet. No. Mm-mm. The philosopher Alexandre Dumas said, do not value money for any more or any less than it is worth. It is a good servant, but a bad master. And we can't talk about money without quoting Warren Buffett. Banking is a very good business if you don't do anything dumb. That's probably true too. And finally, this from Robert Schiller. Finance is not merely about making money. It is about achieving our deep goals and protecting the fruits of our labors. It's about stewardship and therefore about achieving a good society. Now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And now the four-way test. Is it the truth, Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And now let's acknowledge each other from a large but friendly distance. Okay.
Thank you, Susan, for that moment of inspiration. As most of you know, billing statements were mailed out yesterday for your club dues. Those who get dues statements by snail mail will be getting them later. Check your spam filter to make sure that you did receive them yesterday if they didn't show up in your inbox, because they do come from Intuit QuickBooks, so it might look like spam, and always doesn't show up as Rotary Club of Des Moines. John Lewis will introduce our keynote speaker, but remember, for questions after our speaker, there's a mic stand over by the hallway. Kitty will sanitize between questions. And again, please do not shout out your question from your seat. And something new this week, please identify yourself before the question so our live stream viewers know who's asking the questions. We all here can look and see who you are, but they can't on the live stream. We want them to be able to know who's asking the questions. So with that, down everything one more time.
Oh, man. Please, overwhelming. But, Susan, those are great quotes you had. But one I always liked from Willie Sutton, and it's well known, but I'll just remind you, and then we can think about it together. But one time when he was in the big house, in one of the several big houses he ended up in, they had him on the psychiatrist's couch. And so the psychiatrist leaned down and said, "Willie, tell me, why is it you rob banks?" And Willie, matter of factly, said, "Because that's where the money is." And I guess that's what maybe took our speaker to that industry those years ago. I really pleasant today to have a chance to introduce John Sorensen. He and I have known each other for a long time, 30, 40 years, I don't know how long. Almost from the day that he came as a new product from the University of Northern Iowa. And David, that'll be $1 in the pot. I know you're willing to pay for such things, but at any rate, I could talk a long time, but John asked specifically the shorter the better the introduction. And so I will give him kind of a USA Today headlines, kind of a definition or a introduction. I hope that'll work. John Sorensen is the 5th Chief Staff Officer in the 113-year history of the IBA. They really run through executives over there. Yeah. Not even 40 years apiece. So he's a graduate of the University of Northern Iowa and an emeritus member of their school's Business Executive Advisory Board. He's a certified association executive, which I happen to share with him, and he's a past chairman of the Iowa Society of Association Executives, the National Alliance of State Banking Associations, past president of that, and also of the Wisconsin Graduate School of Banking. He has served on the board of the American Bankers Association, the Iowa Business Council, the Shazam Debit Network, Iowa PBS, or PBS Iowa, no, IPBS, isn't it? That's right. The 4-H Foundation, and Meals from the Heartland. He was the recipient of the ABI 2006 Leadership for Iowa Award. John and his wife Lynette have 2 grown children, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming John Sorensen to our club. Yeah,
So thank you, John. It's an honor to be introduced. It's always an honor to be introduced by someone who you truly respect and has been a leader in our industry, the association world, years. And so part of the reason I'm here is because John Lewis asked me. And also appreciate Susan. For those of you who don't know, she's retiring soon. Retirement is in process, and I had the opportunity to work with her. I was a member of the Iowa PBS Foundation Board. It's been a joy. She brought so many wonderful things to that organization, and we're going to miss her. Susan mentioned, when Susan spoke, I thought about a few people who had an influence on my world. When I first started in this business, Bob Rigler, some of you may know, a banker, legislator from New Hampton, was superintendent. And we'd travel the state and we'd do these regional meetings. They were great fun. You know, we'd golf during the day. We'd do an hour-long business meeting just so we could check the box. And then we'd have a dinner and drinks and a speaker at night. And Bob was usually part of that group. And Bob would get up and say, in only Bob Rigler style, very stern, kind of a Holmes Foster type of person, if you know Holmes. Banking is inherently profitable as long as losses can be avoided. And for those of you who know Bob, it would bring down the house because he's great at stating the obvious. He would do it better than I did, clearly, because I didn't get it. Maybe it's the mask. I'm not hearing a lot of laughter out there. But the other thing that made me, when Susan introduced me, so the Iowa Bankers Association, actually 133 years, John, 5 executives during that time. But at one time, back in the day, when bank robberies were prevalent across the state of Iowa, Dillinger, others engaged in that, the normal people you think of in robbing banks. One of the things the association did was coordinate vigilante groups in every county in the state of Iowa. First state in the union to ever do that. Worked great, actually reduced insurance costs, bond coverage for banks in Iowa. And so the association was actually an arms dealer to bankers and communities to provide, arms in order to address these bank robberies that were occurring across the country. So kind of the precursor. Today we do more, on cyber protection, and not that we don't still have concerns from a physical security standpoint, but now it's moved on to cyber, a different role. But as you always learn from history. Always look back at the history of any organization, and you can learn a lot. It can educate you moving forward. So, so I'm going to make a few comments about the association, give you a little background on that, a little bit on the industry, try and be very brief, and then we'll go to Q&A, and the Q&As will be fine. Just put them in true and false format, if you would. The only way I answer Q&A. So a little bit about the IBA. The IBA is a 133-year-old organization dedicated to serving strong financial institutions in the state. We do that by serving approximately 300 Iowa banks through advocacy, workforce development, and by providing community bank solutions, which we actually provide throughout the Midwest. We advocate for public policy that supports a competitive marketplace. We think by doing that, consumers win. And we also advocate for a regulatory overlay that is tailored to the size and business model of the financial institution. In other words, J.P. Morgan should not be regulated in the same manner as People's Bank from Rock Valley. And that kind of came up after the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of Dodd-Frank was an overlay that was not adjusted to the financial institution, affected community banks significantly. I will say we've made significant progress since Dodd-Frank was passed in trying to roll some of those back, or at least tweak those to make them more accommodative, because they get in the way of us serving our customers and providing credit and reaching out and doing things without having to be constantly looked at from an examination standpoint and dotting your I's and crossing your T's, as you know, in any industry. That's very important. So our advocacy role stretches beyond policymakers to regulators, the media, and the general public. We try to reflect our members' commitment to community through our partnerships, especially with the Iowa high schools, but other groups that we feel share our values. Iowa PBS, Habitat for Humanity, Character Counts, Iowa 4-H Foundation, you know, the typical groups that engage in youth development, leadership development, and sharing information with Iowans. Iowa banks contributed $36 million to community organizations in 2019 alone. And their staff members provided over 500,000 volunteer hours to organizations. We tally these numbers so that we can talk to the media and policymakers about them. So we think they're a pretty key component to Iowa Main Streets and a pretty key partner to all the businesses along our main streets in our state. Regarding workforce, Iowa banks employ nearly 40,000 Iowans, but not unlike other businesses, at least pre-pandemic. Attracting and retaining workforce, especially in rural Iowa, has been a challenge, which is why we focus on issues and programs around workforce attraction, training, benefits, DEI, leadership development, and more. And finally, we provide community bank solutions to banks throughout the Midwest, actually, with a focus on Iowa. We have a regulatory compliance team that works with banks to do pre-exam reviews to help them with their regulatory compliance process, and also provide training to banks. We have a mortgage affiliate many of you may be familiar with. They might service your mortgage. It's called Iowa Bankers Mortgage Company. That serves as an aggregator of purchase loans from banks for sale to secondary market investors who contract with us to service those loans. This has given us a window into the mortgage picture, which has been an interesting and very busy window this year, with rates obviously dropping to significant levels. As you would expect, even with the 30-year mortgage rate dropping below 3%, our volume has been off the charts, with capacity being the only limitation, frankly, and that means people. It's hard to find people right now to fill positions within our mortgage company. So we work for the banks. We're like a wholesaler. We now service over 60,000 loans totaling over $8 billion. And our credit quality remains steady. And we think that primarily is because of the relationship lenders we work with. Finding the right product for the customer, working them through that process, and tends to lead to good results for everyone involved. So less than 1% of our borrowers have elected payment forbearance at this point in time out of those 60,000 loans, which is always a good indicator, and our delinquency rate remains below 2%. By refinancing mortgages, which many of our citizens have taken advantage of, we're lowering payments and we believe helping Iowans weather the financial impact of the pandemic. We also operate an insurance agency offering health, life, property and casualty, and annuities to banks and their agencies. And our most significant product being an association health plan that we offer in the state of Minnesota and Iowa, and cover about 26,000 lives in those two states. And we are in process of, and John kind of brought this to my attention, you know, since we read about it in the paper, we are in process of building a new office facility. It's always interesting to build a new facility during a pandemic. But we are bursting at the seams in our current location in Johnston. So we're building a new facility on North Park Drive, actually be technically in Urbandale, across from Delta Dental, for those of you who are familiar with that part of town. And we have begun groundbreaking and construction of that facility. It will be for our 220 team members, and then also a significant training center for Iowa bankers and financial professionals across the state of Iowa. So we're excited about creating that home for Iowa banking in our community. Our theme this year is Built by You, backed by Iowa Banks. It fits in well with our focus on Main Street this past year, which leads me into my next topic, the health of the industry we serve, which, as you all know, tends to reflect what's going on in the economy. In Iowa, we have more banks per capita than any other state in the country. And for you, that translates into a healthy, competitive banking environment where consumers, businesses, and farmers win. We have 1,500 offices across the state in nearly every Iowa community. And let me just put things into context. I always give Debbie Durham a hard time about this. I love her. I'm a big fan of Debbie Durham at the Department of Economic Development. When you think about all they do, which is significant for our state in making investments in economic development, and Debbie's the best at getting the most out of public-private partnerships. Their total budget is about $350 million of dollars they have to work with to prime the pump of our economy. Iowa banks support the economy with $80 billion, with a B, billion in loans alone, and pay state and federal taxes equal to IEDA's budget. So a significant player, sometimes, in my view, because bankers aren't very good at bragging, take it for granted, but just a very important cog that we need if we're going to pull ourselves up from this pandemic-induced recession we're experiencing. So Iowa banks, again, support the economy with $80 billion. Unlike, so I'm going back to, and John will be surprised it took me this long to raise credit unions. But unlike some of our competitors, we do pay significant taxes to support education, infrastructure, healthcare, and other areas that are important to our state. We have some credit union competitors, by the way, who continue to leverage a tax exemption meant for people of modest means to grow without giving back in the way of taxation. I apologize if we have any credit union execs in the room, but I have to. It's a significant inequity that we're seeing, and as those organizations grow and become the largest financial institutions in our state, which our largest financial institution is now our credit union, Green State, that makes $80 million a year. And we have community banks, average size about $350 million, competing with this behemoth. And that behemoth pays no federal or state income taxes. So there's my commercial. Today, most banks are a combination lender and technology company. Digital banking has become mainstream, accelerated by the pandemic, as most consumers move to online or mobile. Although the old-fashioned drive-in is now back in vogue, as people weren't going into the banks, and many of them were conducting their business via drive-through as well. Many consumer payments have moved to card not present, so you're not swiping your card, you're inputting the information. And we actually ended up with a coin shortage at some businesses this year. I don't know if any of you kind of tracked that, but we had an issue with coinage being taken out of the economy because there wasn't the same activity. And so the U.S. Mint is the producer of our coinage, and the Federal Reserve manages those inventory levels and working with other vendors. And we were encouraging, and really still are, encouraging people who have coinage at home to take it in and cash it in for dollars or deposit in your bank so that we can rebuild the supply of coinage to keep the economy going, especially for those retail businesses that are so still dependent on some of that coinage. So there's much discussion about the relationship between fintech companies who have truly improved the consumer experience and the traditional bank, which kind of built and maintain the payment system in our country and provide important consumer protections that oftentimes don't apply to a fintech provider. So, excuse me, equality in access and regulation will be a significant issue as we move forward from here for our industry. And we truly believe consumers are best served when the positive attributes of both can be combined through a partnership between bank and financial technology companies that, again, enhance that consumer experience. So just a little bit about the FDIC, and let me know if I'm starting to run long, Doug, but so the FDIC recently released bank performance results for the first 6 months of the year. For those of you who might have followed that, if you read the headlines, it indicated the bank profits tumble. But you really have to dig a little deeper as to why that is happening. Early on in the pandemic, many financial institutions, especially the big ones, I think the big four made up about half of the decline in overall revenue or profitability. we're funneling a good deal of their money into the loan loss reserves in anticipation of losses that will be connected with the economic downturn. And actually, they were exaggerated by a new FASB accounting requirement called CECL, Current Expected Credit Loss Model, which I won't bore you with, but it actually accelerated recognition of losses that you are to looking forward instead of ones that are immediate and you can see that they're going to happen. It's more of, okay, what's the economy look like, and based on that model, how will your loan portfolio perform? So that increased the amount of dollars going into loan loss reserves, which reduces the earnings of financial institutions. And even their results were exaggerated by, net interest margins hit an all-time low as the Fed lowered rates. Always takes longer for the institutions to adjust those to maintain a margin. And fee income was up primarily due to the mortgage volume and the trading activities of the larger banks when you look at the nationwide numbers. We're also experiencing record deposit inflows due to stimulus payments and increased consumer savings rates. Again, people probably staying at home, not taking vacations and things we normally do to spend dollars. And that left most banks with newfound liquidity that they are looking to deploy. So Iowa's results, I won't get into as many of these details because I want to be cognizant of time. Iowa's results were somewhat reflective of the country. They're actually a little better, which we always are. But our earnings were down just off 2% from the prior year, and these are for our 274 community banks who are domiciled in our state. Our loans were up 10%, fantastic. A lot of that related to the Paycheck Protection Program, where our banks went out and serviced their small businesses on Main Street, and mortgage lending as well. Our deposits were up 13% year over year, an incredible increase in deposits. Credit quality remains strong at this point. We aren't seeing appreciable increases in delinquencies yet. Although, again, much still to be concerned about. The economic impact of the derecho on farmers and businesses and homeowners yet to be sorted out. Iowa's recent spike in COVID cases, again, impacting small businesses just as they were starting to get back on their feet. And agriculture continues to struggle with low commodity prices and reduced earnings, as I know everyone in this room would be aware of. Although I do remind my agricultural friends that stable land values, low interest rate, and low debt to asset ratios make this situation much more manageable on the part of our farmers than the 1980s, which is always referenced when we talk about the ag situation. So overall, it's become clear I think the aggressive fiscal and monetary response from Congress and the Federal Reserve have helped to minimize the economic disruption from the pandemic. The $2 trillion CARES Act was the largest, most quickly passed legislation response in our nation's history. The banking system has held up well, markets are functioning, and although many of our friends and neighbors have had their lives disrupted by job losses or other challenges, health challenges they face, half of the people who lost their jobs at the beginning of the pandemic have now returned to the workforce. So things are trending in the right direction. Some believe another stimulus package from Congress would be appropriate. At this time, I'm not optimistic based on what I'm hearing out of Washington. And we'd probably be in that camp that it would make sense. I do want to make one point, the Paycheck Protection Program, because John said, what have banks been doing in the pandemic? I can tell you for the first 3 months, it was implementing the Paycheck Protection Program. This was a new program that, thanks to Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst, who's on the Small Business Committee and had played a big role in developing that program, making the determination that it made sense to tap the bank relationships with Main Street to get those dollars on Main Street as quickly as possible. And then they're also involved with the ongoing implementation. So we're thankful for her office. But in Iowa, we had 61,000 PPP loans made totaling $5 billion, covering 87% of the small businesses in our state. And based on the estimated job, contributed to retaining about 750,000 jobs. Very important program. I can't say enough about what our bankers are saying about the benefit of that to Main Street. Just to give you an idea, the SBA normally does about $35 billion in annual loans. We pumped $600 billion through that program in less than 5 months. Matter of fact, the first 2 months, we did 10 times their annual amount. And I gotta say, I gotta brag a little bit. Our bankers work 24/7 because the concern was early on, there was only a small amount, well, small, $350 billion. But the thought was that that money's gonna disappear quickly, and we wanna get as much onto our Main Street customers as we possibly can, including farmers, healthcare, hospitals, rural hospitals, and rural businesses. And just a spectacular job of doing that, and at a time where many of the bankers were working from home. Many of the staff were working from home. So very proud of our industry in that regard. And a lot of that was done while the rules were being written, which made it even more challenging. So, I think it made us all appreciate the fact that relationships matter. That's what community banking is all about. When everyone's vested in everyone else's survival on Main Street. So we can continue to be proponents of a streamlined forgiveness process for PPP loans. Again, we'll see if that happens before Congress recesses. But let me close with a bit of optimism. The pandemic has certainly given us much to worry about. But remember, we entered it with a very strong economy. We had the lowest unemployment rate in a half century. We have a strong and resilient banking system. And Congress and the Fed responded quickly to provide a bridge to better times. So we understand Iowa banks play an important role in restoring and renewing our economy and jobs, and we look forward to that challenge. So here ends my comments. Appreciate everybody's attention. Welcome any true false answers or questions you might have.
Thank you, John. This is Kitty, but I'm reading an email from Kent Sovereign, who emailed the following question. A few organizations that advocate for older citizens are promoting what they call age-friendly banking. The Age-Friendly Initiative advocates for banking products, services, and protections that will improve the economic security of older adults. For example, as folks grow older, a barrage of scammers, fraudsters, and even family members and close social friends threaten the ability of older adults to remain financially secure and thrive in place. Is the Iowa Banking Association aware of how its members are engaging with this or a similar age-friendly program for their customers?
Go to my good friend Kent. And yeah, it's clearly an important issue for our industry because it's important to our communities. And the banks are usually in best position to identify abuses of our elderly population. And I'm not completely clear on what all that program entails, but I'm sure Kent would educate me on that and would probably welcome the opportunity to do that, in which I would as well. But we have a number of programs in place to identify elder abuse and protect our important population in all of our communities.
John Tone asking the question. Thank you, John, for your presentation. My question is, are the national brands part of the Iowa Bankers Association? And what is the percentage of Iowa-based versus nationally based as far as the banking dollars in our state?
So yes, they are. The IBA, we have 98% of the banks in Iowa that are members of the Iowa Bankers Association. Very biggest, very smallest. Wells, B of A, West Bank, all are participating in our programs. And from an overall standpoint, though, Iowa has more community bank branches as a percentage than any other state in the country. So, again, I kind of mentioned with our number of banking charters, we have a very diverse banking industry, and I think that's good. I mean, as you all know, our economy is diverse and complicated, and there are certain sizes of banks, depending on their business model and what they emphasize. We need all of them to support our economy going forward. But we have found the industry is unified on the issues that are most important, I think, to Iowa communities. Good question.
John, hi. Two questions, but they're related, as you'll see. what is the IBA doing to increase diversity in the Iowa bank industry? And what are you trying to do to stop seems to be the inevitable decline the number of community banks? When I got started 34 years ago, there was about 500. Now you're telling us 274. How do we, when do we come together and say, we need to do this both on diversity, population is changing, and for growth of small business? Thank you.
Or both of those. And we've been trying to tell the story, how important it is to maintain community banks. You know, it does have an impact when you have the senior management and even investors located in the communities where you're serving. You know, you're dealing with your neighbors and friends. Not that the larger banks aren't in a similar situation, and emphasize that as well. But the biggest difficulty for community banking has been regulation, indiscriminate regulation instead of targeted. So we're trying to address that through our policymakers. Technology also presents a challenge, although we have partners in the state who allow our community banks to come together and work on various technology initiatives. And frankly, some of the off-the-shelf products allow them to operate just as efficiently and effectively as our larger institutions. Regarding diversity, obviously, you know, we're all adapting to this new social unrest around diversity. I think we've all agreed the message has been received, the kind of the undercurrent here. So we're taking a thoughtful approach. You know, we're careful not to jump onto things just out of a gratuitous nature. But we've organized a diversity task force within the association of people who are experts at it or have been in a circumstance where they can share their experience in dealing with our industry. And they're going to come forward with recommendations to our board of directors on how we can do a better job. Not that our industry has not, because I think we have made significant efforts to include diversity across the board, not, you know, based on race, sex, you know, whatever that diversity may look like. You know, I can only agree with what you're saying, and we all need to kind of incorporate that in our day-to-day activities, and that's what we're trying to do with the IBA.
I'd welcome an opportunity to talk with you, John, and particularly about African American history in Iowa. Thanks. John, that is not my book.
Okay, well, the book. Yeah.
I get that you just pushed the wrong button on that one.
Uh-oh.
39 people put that together, worked 6 years for no pay or royalties. And I wish some of them were here because they would let you know whose lives matter.
Good.
Hi, John. I'm Skeet Wooten. And I have a question that sort of dovetails on one that Hal asked. And it gets to how community banks can deal with larger banks and the scale that they bring into an operation. You said that you'd seen an increase in demand at drive-ins. And it seems that that could be a temporary phenomenon because technology has moved at a very rapid pace where, you know, I can do all my banking on a cell phone. And it seems to me that perhaps it's the larger institutions that have the biggest issue with that because they have so much brick and mortar around. But community banks don't have the asset base, the equity base that they can afford to make the technology investment. So is there a possibility going forward where the association can provide that platform for smaller banks to be able to compete with the Wells Fargos?
Yeah, we've got a couple of initiatives that kind of work towards creating a technology innovation center, I guess, for lack of a better term, with our team. I will also say I'm on the board of Shazam, and that's always been a big initiative of Shazam as well. I mean, they now operate in across the country actually, but they're an Iowa based and Iowa born. The IBA actually started Shazam back in the day, and they clearly have significant resources to devote to some of that innovation and research and development that will need to be provided to community banks. But part of it, in the community banking world, you need to pick the right partners, right? You need to do your due diligence, and many times you can accomplish just as much by partnering with an organization as opposed to owning a fintech company or whether that's lending or payments or whatever function you may be looking to outsource. But it's certainly on the top of our list. We know where the future's headed. It will take a little longer to get there in Iowa because so many of our rural communities still love face-to-face. I don't know, maybe COVID will change that, but they like to be able to go and talk to their banker and see them in a branch and get feedback on their financial decisions. But that's not the way of millennials and the next group. So we need to be on top of that, and hopefully we're making the right investments to do that. Good question. Good. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, John, for spending time with our club today and sharing such an interesting and informative presentation. A lot of things there I wasn't aware of, and obviously some very big numbers to deal with. So in your honor today, we are donating the book, The Atlas Obscura Explorer's Guide for the World's Most Adventurous Kid. A long title. So if you could take a few moments of time and add some words of inspiration and sign it so the students at the downtown school library can enjoy it. Thank you all for being with us today, whether in person or live streaming or watching at a later time. For those of you watching on YouTube, there was a total of 33 of us today in the room, so we're inching up a little bit. We're all safely distanced. And if the camera could turn, we do have a new reserve table over here you could show. This is for the friendless past presidents, which past President Skeet Wooten is holding down on his own. So we hope more of you out there that are watching will consider RSVPing and, excuse me, come and attend in person if you would, and if you feel, that is, if you feel comfortable with doing such. Again, we've moved our RSVPs to Tuesday at noon, so it gives you a little bit more time to make a decision of whether you can or can't attend. You can sign up on the, excuse me, email link that will go out on Friday or in each Tuesday's bulletin newsletter. And we have some upcoming meetings next week, September 17th. We have our own Mark Isles and Bob Christensen will be here talking about the funeral business in 2020. On September 24th, Secretary of State Paul Pate. And then October 1st, Teresa Greenfield, candidate for U.S. Senate. I guess I wasn't aware she was running. Maybe she should consider getting some advertisement on TV, so a little bit of recognition. And then just a note that Senator Joni Ernst will be scheduled for our October 15th meeting. We invite one. We want the other to have an opportunity to speak with us. Thank you for being with us again today, being part of your Rotary Club of Des Moines. Thanks for those tuning in later and watching our meeting. And as always, think about leaving something behind each and every day, no matter how, how large or small. And little things do matter. With that, we are adjourned.